A wealthy man scorns and abandons a blind foal, ordering it to be left in the woods. Later, a kind-hearted girl finds the foal, rescues it, cares for it, and trains it into a champion. What the millionaire does next will leave you speechless. Adam Anderson, known as a breeder of champions, was renowned across the country. His horses symbolized excellence, dominating equestrian competitions and consistently claiming victory. For Adam, the world was divided into two groups: those who created value and those who served no purpose. That morning, the first rays of sunlight painted the sky a warm orange as a stable hand rushed into Adam's office. "Mr. Anderson, Estrella is going into labor," he said nervously. Adam looked up from the papers he was reviewing, adjusting his tie with a practiced gesture. His perfectly tailored suits and composed demeanor exuded authority. He stood, grasping a walnut wood cane, not out of necessity but as another symbol of his stature. Without a word, he made his way toward the stables, unaware that this birth would soon test not only his priorities but also his humanity. "I hope everything turns out as it should," Adam replied, his tone carrying a mix of expectation and warning. The stable where Estrella was housed was the largest and most comfortable on the estate. The mare, with her golden coat and graceful movements, was his pride and joy. She came from a legendary bloodline, whose descendants had won countless championships. Adam had invested heavily in her, pinning all his hopes on the foal about to be born. Inside the stable, a team of veterinarians worked carefully. Estrella snorted heavily, her hind legs trembling with effort. Adam stood at the entrance, his dark eyes scrutinizing every movement with a calculating precision. "How much longer?" he asked, breaking the tense silence. "Not much, Mr. Anderson," one of the veterinarians replied. "Everything is progressing smoothly." Moments later, a soft whinny announced the arrival of the foal. The veterinarian gently received the foal, cleaning it as it attempted its first movements. Adam stepped forward, eager to see the result of his investment. "It's a colt," the veterinarian announced with a faint smile. "Strong, with excellent conformation." Adam exhaled briefly in satisfaction, but his relief was short-lived. One of the assistants began whispering to the lead veterinarian, who frowned as he examined the newborn more closely. "What's going on?" Adam demanded, his tone now sharp with impatience. The veterinarian straightened, meeting Adam's gaze with noticeable unease. "Mr. Anderson, I believe there's an issue." Adam's face hardened. "Speak plainly." "The colt appears to be blind. His eyes don't respond to light, and his movements suggest he cannot orient himself visually. It's an irreversible condition." The stable fell silent, the weight of the revelation settling heavily in the air. Adam stood still for a moment, watching the colt weakly struggle to stand. Its thin legs trembled, but there was an undeniable determination in its every movement. "Blind?" Adam repeated, his voice sharp, as if the very word were an insult. "Yes, sir," the veterinarian replied cautiously. "It will not be able to compete or perform like other horses. However, with proper care, it can live a peaceful life." Adam's attitude changed immediately. The fleeting trace of worry disappeared, replaced by his usual cold and calculating expression. "A horse that can't compete is useless," he said firmly. "I won't waste resources on something with no future," Adam declared firmly. "But sir," the veterinarian began, attempting to reason with him. "I've made my decision," Adam interrupted sharply. "Get that creature off my property. I don't want to see it again." The veterinary team and caretakers exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared to challenge the millionaire. Not long after, a young caretaker with a compassionate heart was assigned the task. He gently loaded the small foal into a cart and set off toward a secluded area near the edge of the woods. The journey was long, and the foal, unaware of the fate awaiting it, lay quietly at the bottom of the cart, letting out soft whinnies as the wheels creaked along the path. When they reached the spot, the caretaker stopped the cart and carefully lifted the foal down. "I'm sorry, little one," he said softly, stroking its moon-white coat with sadness. "I wish I could do more for you." The foal was left alone, lost in the darkness of its world. Not understanding why it had been separated from its mother, it let out faint whinnies, searching for an answer that would never come. Curling up on the cold grass, it shivered as the night wind began to blow. Deep within, a flicker of survival stirred, a spark it couldn't yet comprehend. The night fully descended, and the clear sky revealed an endless blanket of stars. In a modest cabin near the forest, 12-year-old Lucia Garcia, brimming with energy and a compassionate heart, was finishing the evening dishes alongside her mother. Since her father's passing a few years earlier, they had lived alone. Life wasn't easy, but they had learned to support each other through everything. As Lucia dreed the last plate, she suddenly heard a strange sound coming from outside. She dropped the dish towel and stood still, straining to listen. "Mom, did you hear that?" she asked curiously, turning toward the window. "Hear what, sweetie?" her mother replied absent-mindedly, caught up in her own thoughts. "A neigh, I swear I heard a horse." Her mother frowned, setting aside what she was doing to glance out toward the forest, dark and imposing under the moonlight. "Lucia, it can't be. The Anderson Ranch horses don't wander this far. It was probably just some forest animal." But Lucia wasn't convinced. She had always been a curious child with a special connection to animals. She spent hours tending to the chickens and their old dog, and more than once, her mother had caught her nursing injured birds or stray animal babies back to health. "I don't think it's just any animal, Mom. It sounds like a horse, and it sounds scared." Before her mother could stop her, Lucia grabbed an old flashlight resting on the shelf by the door and dashed outside. "Lucia, come back. It's late, and the forest is dangerous," her mother shouted from the doorway, but the girl was already out of earshot. Lucia ran down the path leading to the forest, following the faint sound she could still hear. With each step, the darkness grew thicker, but she didn't slow down. Her small feet carefully navigated the twigs and fallen leaves, while the flashlight beam lit the way ahead. "Where are you?" she whispered, her breath quickening. The neigh came again, louder this time, closer. Lucia quickened her pace, the sound guiding her deeper into the forest. The girl hurried forward until the flashlight beam illuminated a figure on the ground. There it was. A small foal, its moon-white coat glowing faintly in the shadows, curled up and alone. Lucia froze, her heart pounding as she took in the sight. The foal lifted its head, sensing her presence, but made no move to run. It remained still, as if unsure of what to do. "Oh no," Lucia whispered, cautiously approaching. "What are you doing here, little one? You're all alone." She knelt in front of the foal, carefully examining it. It didn't take long for her to notice something unusual about its eyes. They were a pale, cloudy gray and didn't react to the beam of her flashlight. "Are you blind?" she asked softly, even though she knew the foal couldn't answer. Her voice trembled as she imagined how hard it must be for such a small, vulnerable creature to survive in these conditions. The foal let out a soft whinny, as if trying to communicate with her. Lucia felt her heart break a little more. "Don't worry, I'm not leaving you here," she said firmly. She carefully stroked its back, feeling how frail it was. "I'll take you home with me." "We'll be okay," she reassured, glancing around for a way to help the foal. She tried to coax it to walk, gently tugging at it. But the little one stumbled, too weak to follow. After several failed attempts, she realized she needed help. "Wait here, I'll come back for you," she whispered. The foal lowered its head, almost as if it understood she would return. Lucia ran back to the cabin, her thoughts racing faster than her legs. When she arrived, her mother was waiting at the door, visibly worried. "Lucia, where were you? You know how dangerous it is to go out at night," her mother scolded. "Mama, I found a foal. It's blind, and I think someone abandoned it in the forest. We have to help it." "A foal?" her mother asked, incredulous. "Yes, Mama. It's so weak it can't walk on its own. I need your help to bring it here." Lucia's mother sighed, knowing there was no point in arguing. She grabbed an old blanket and followed her daughter back to the spot where the foal had been left. When they arrived, the foal was exactly where Lucia had found it. The girl ran to it, kneeling down to gently stroke its coat. "I told you I'd come back," she whispered with a tender smile. Together, they managed to wrap the foal in the blanket and lift it. The journey back was slow and exhausting, but Lucia didn't complain once. She knew in her heart that she was doing the right thing. When they reached the cabin, they prepared a small area in the backyard, laying down straw and old blankets to make a resting space for the foal. Lucia brought a bowl of water and some warm milk she managed to improvise using an old bottle. "Drink up, little one, you need to regain your strength," she said softly. The foal drank with difficulty, but each sip seemed to restore a bit of energy. Lucia watched with hopeful eyes. "Mama, I think this is a sign," she said, gently stroking the foal's side. "This little one came to us for a reason. We're going to take care of him, and I'll do everything I can to make sure he's okay," Lucia said firmly. Her mother didn't respond right away, but as she looked into her daughter's determined eyes, she realized there was no turning back. That night, as the foal slept safely for the first time, Lucia stayed by its side, whispering promises of a brighter future. She didn't know how, but she was certain that this little horse would change their lives forever. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Lucia's life transformed completely. From the night she rescued the small foal, her backyard became a sanctuary for the blind horse, whom she decided to name Luz. The name wasn't just a symbol of hope, it was also a reminder that, while Luz's eyes couldn't see, his spirit shone with extraordinary strength. Luz thrived under Lucia's care. Every morning, she woke up early to clean the small, makeshift pen they had created and to ensure he had plenty of food. Though the challenges were many, Lucia faced each one with a smile, driven by the unique bond she had formed with the foal. Luz's blindness didn't stop him from learning to trust Lucia. She became his eyes, guiding him with her voice and gentle touches. Using small bells tied to her clothes and a steady, soothing tone, she taught Luz to follow her without fear. Under Lucia's devoted care, Luz flourished. Each morning, she rose early to tend to the small, improvised pen they had built and to make sure he always had enough to eat. Despite the countless challenges, Lucia tackled them with unwavering determination, fueled by the extraordinary bond she shared with the foal. Luz's inability to see didn't hinder his ability to trust Lucia. She became his guide, his eyes, leading him with the soft sound of her voice and gentle touches. Attaching small bells to her clothing and using a calm, consistent tone, she patiently taught Luz to follow her with confidence and without fear. Lucia lifted her chin with pride and firmly replied, "He's not useless. He just needs a chance." Those words were more than just a defense, they were a promise. Lucia was determined not to let anyone belittle Luz. One day, while practicing in the yard, something unexpected happened. Luz, who had been cautiously following Lucia as usual, suddenly stopped. His ears perked up, as if sensing something Lucia couldn't perceive. "What's wrong, Luz?" she asked curiously, turning toward him. "Is something bothering you?" Before she could react further, Luz began to trot on his own, following the sound of the bells tied to Lucia's clothes. The girl watched in amazement as Luz moved through the space with a confidence he had never shown before. It was as if he had discovered a way to overcome his blindness, relying entirely on the sounds and the bond he shared with her. "You did it, Luz. You did it all on your own," Lucia exclaimed, running to him and hugging him tightly. That small victory sparked an idea that had been lingering in Lucia's mind for weeks. Though she knew it would be challenging, she wanted to train Luz for something greater. She had heard about local equestrian competitions, and while she had never seen a blind horse compete, she was convinced that Luz had what it took to shine. "We're going to show everyone what we can do," Lucia whispered to the foal one evening as she brushed his coat. "No matter what they say, you and I can do this." Lucia began researching on her own, watching the training sessions at the Anderson Ranch from a distance. She couldn't get too close, but she absorbed what she could from the methods they used with their competition horses. Later, she adapted those techniques for Luz, incorporating sounds, keywords, and physical cues to guide him. The training days were long and exhausting, but every effort was worth it. Luz began responding with precision to Lucia's instructions, learning to turn, stop, and trot in perfect circles. The bond between them was undeniable. Lucia wasn't just Luz's trainer, she was his friend, his guide, and his family. Meanwhile, at his luxurious ranch, Adam Anderson remained focused on his own horses, completely unaware that the blind foal he had discarded was being trained to achieve a destiny beyond anything he could have imagined. Lucia knew the journey would be tough, but every time she looked at Luz, she saw something no one else did. The determination of a true champion. Deep down, even though no one openly admitted it, the townspeople were beginning to realize that this young girl and her blind horse were far stronger than anyone had ever expected. Over time, Lucia and Luz's hard work began to pay off. The backyard training sessions became more advanced, and Luz displayed a level of skill and a drive to improve that even Lucia hadn't anticipated. With each passing day, the blind foal grew more confident, as if he understood he was destined for something extraordinary. One afternoon, as Lucia adjusted the makeshift training rope they used for practicing jumps, her mother stepped out of the house with a concerned expression. "Sweetheart, I need to talk to you," she said, crossing her arms. Lucia, absorbed in her work, set the rope down and walked over. "What's wrong, Mama?" she asked. "What's wrong, Mama?" "I've been hearing things in town," her mother said hesitantly. "People are saying you're wasting your time with this horse, that you should be focusing on other things, like school or helping out more at home." Lucia pressed her lips together, the weight of her mother's words sinking deep. But as she glanced at Luz, standing calmly just a few meters away, a spark of determination ignited in her chest. "Mama, I know not everyone understands what I'm doing, but Luz isn't just a horse. He's special, and I know that together, we can accomplish something incredible," she said with quiet conviction. Her mother sighed, realizing she couldn't hold her daughter back. Since the day the foal had entered their lives, she had watched Lucia work tirelessly, tackling every challenge with a maturity and strength that impressed her. "All right," she said at last. "But promise me you won't neglect your other responsibilities." "I promise," Lucia replied with a grateful smile. With her mother's renewed support, Lucia doubled down on her efforts. Before long, the small backyard began to feel too limited for Lucia's growing training needs. Determined to keep pushing forward, Lucia started searching for larger spaces to practice. One afternoon, while exploring the area, she came across an open field near the river that seemed perfect for extended training sessions. For weeks, Lucia and Luz trained in that open field, far from the critical eyes of the town. There, she began teaching Luz to jump over small obstacles. Using branches and logs she placed strategically, she guided him with her voice and the soft jingling of the bells tied to her ankles. "Come on, Luz, you can do it. Trust me," she encouraged, urging him to tackle each new challenge. At first, the jumps were low, just a few inches off the ground. But over time, Luz began to gain confidence and strength, and the heights gradually increased. Each successful leap was met with Lucia's enthusiastic cheers, affectionate pats, and small pieces of apple as a reward. "I knew you could do it, champ," she whispered with pride, wrapping her arms around him tightly. One day, while Lucia was training in the field, she heard the sound of an approaching engine. She looked toward the road and saw a luxury SUV pull to a stop at a distance. From it emerged a bulky man dressed in expensive clothing, accompanied by a younger man holding a camera. Lucia recognized the man immediately, Adam Anderson, the owner of the largest ranch in town. Though she had never met him in person, she knew of his reputation as a powerful and arrogant man, notorious for looking down on those he deemed beneath him. Adam studied Lucia with curiosity. He had heard rumors about a young girl training a blind horse. At first, he had dismissed the story, but the idea that someone was drawing attention in the equestrian world piqued his interest. "What do we have here?" Adam said mockingly as he approached. Lucia felt her heart pounding, but she refused to let fear show on her face. Straightening her posture, she replied firmly, "I'm training my horse." The man raised an eyebrow, his gaze shifting to Luz, who stood calmly by Lucia's side. That's your horse?" he asked incredulously. "Yes, his name is Luz." Adam let out a loud laugh. "A blind horse? What do you think you're going to accomplish with something like that? Horses need to see to compete, girl." "Are you wasting your time?" Adam sneered. Lucia clenched her fists, fighting to keep her composure. "Luz is more capable than you think, and he doesn't need your approval to prove it." Her comment caught Adam off guard for a moment, but he quickly regained his smug demeanor. "Good luck, little girl. But don't get your hopes up. Horses like that never go far." With those words, he turned and walked back to his SUV, leaving Lucia behind with a mix of frustration and renewed determination. "You'll see, Luz," she said, looking at the foal with a smile. "We're going to prove everyone wrong, even him." From that day on, Lucia trained with more intensity than ever. She knew the road ahead would be long, but she was certain Luz was destined to shine, even in a world that refused to see his potential. What she didn't realize was that her encounter with Adam Anderson was only the beginning, and fate had far greater plans in store. The big day had finally arrived. After months of rigorous training, Lucia had registered Luz for his first local equestrian competition. The registration process had been challenging. She had to convince the organizing committee that a blind horse could compete. Her determination and the demonstrations of Luz's abilities eventually opened the doors. The competition was set to take place in an impressive arena on the outskirts of town, a venue where the best horses in the region competed in various categories. When Lucia arrived with Luz, she felt the weight of curious and skeptical gazes settle on them. "Is that blind horse really going to compete?" a man muttered from the crowd. "What a waste of time," scoffed another. "This isn't a circus show." Lucia ignored the remarks, focusing all her attention on Luz. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she also knew they had worked too hard to let the words of others intimidate them. "Come on, Luz. We've come this far. Nothing is going to stop us now," she whispered, gently stroking his soft coat. With her mother's help, who had decided to accompany her that day, Lucia prepared Luz for the competition. She carefully adjusted an elegant harness she had restored with her own hands, making sure he was comfortable. While the other competitors flaunted expensive and luxurious equipment, Lucia knew that what truly mattered was the bond she had built with her horse. Before the competition began, Lucia led Luz to a quiet spot behind the arena, away from the noise and commotion, to calm him and go over the signals they had practiced countless times. "Listen to my voice, Luce. No matter what happens out there, just focus on me. We can do this," she said, her tone steady and reassuring. Luce flicked his ears toward her, responding to her voice as he always did. The quiet confidence he exuded filled Lucia with strength, reminding her why they were there. Shortly after, the start of their category was announced. It was an obstacle course, one of the most challenging events, where horses had to demonstrate their ability to jump and respond to their riders' precise commands. Lucia mounted Luce carefully, guiding him to the starting point. From her vantage point, she spotted Adam Anderson in one of the main stands, surrounded by other wealthy ranchers. Though she hadn't seen him in a long time, she knew he wouldn't recognize her. To him, she was just another child in the crowd. "That's the man who abandoned you," Lucia thought as she gently stroked Luce's neck. "But it doesn't matter. Today isn't about him. Today is about you." When their turn came, the announcer called out her name and Luce's with an almost indifferent tone, as though expecting little from them. Lucia didn't let it bother her. "Come on, Luce. This is our moment," she said with a smile, giving him the first signal. He moved forward with a steady gait, guided by the soft jingling of the bells tied to Lucia's ankles. The first obstacle loomed ahead, a low fence meant to serve as a simple starting challenge. Luce cleared it gracefully, as if determined to prove that his blindness was no limitation. The crowd fell silent for a moment, stunned by the flawless execution. The next obstacle was more challenging. 2 consecutive fences followed by a sharp turn. Lucia stayed calm, speaking softly to Luce as she guided him. "Just a little more. Jump," she whispered. Luce responded perfectly, clearing both fences and making the tight turn without missing a beat. The murmurs in the crowd shifted from skepticism to astonishment. "Is this for real? That blind horse is handling the course better than some of the other competitors," someone muttered in disbelief. Adam Anderson, who had been casually chatting with a colleague, looked up when he heard the buzz of conversation. He watched the performance with growing interest, noting the elegance and determination of the horse. There was something vaguely familiar about him, though Adam couldn't quite put his finger on it. Lucia and Luce pressed on, tackling each obstacle with courage. The girls' signals were clear and consistent, and Luce responded with an accuracy that left everyone in awe. As they progressed through the course, the applause from the crowd began to swell, turning the initial indifference into a thunderous ovation that echoed across the arena. When Lucia and Luce finally crossed the finish line, Lucia leaned forward, wrapping her arms around Luce with tears in her eyes. They had Danny yet. The crowd erupted in cheers, and while Lucia couldn't hear the murmurs of disbelief and admiration spreading among the spectators, she knew they had left an impression. In the stands, Adam Anderson watched silently, his eyes narrowing. There was something about the horse he couldn't ignore, an air of familiarity that unsettled him. Determined to learn more, he called over one of the event organizers to inquire about the animal and its owner. "This can't be. Could it really be that horse?" Adam muttered to himself, a mixture of disbelief and unease creeping into his voice. Unknowingly, Lucia had taken the first step toward confronting the past and proving to the world, including Adam, that true greatness is not about appearances but about heart and the will to overcome the impossible. The competition had ended, and though the official results had yet to be announced, the name of Lucia and her blind horse echoed throughout the arena. The crowd, which had initially looked at them with disdain, now approached to congratulate them. "What you achieved with that horse is incredible," exclaimed an excited woman. "He's the bravest horse I've ever seen," added a young rider who had competed earlier. Lucia smiled humbly, stroking Luce as he calmly ate a piece of apple she had offered him. For her, the greatest victory wasn't the applause but the satisfaction of proving what they were capable of. However, not everyone shared in the joy. From the stands, Adam Anderson watched their every move with growing interest. There was something about the way Luce moved and the evident bond between the horse and the girl that deeply unsettled him. "That horse. I'm sure I know him," he murmured. He called over one of the event organizers, a middle-aged man with a formal demeanor. "Who is that girl? And what do you know about her horse?" Adam demanded in an authoritative tone. The organizer glanced at his notes before replying. "Her name is Lucia Gomez. The horse is hers. A blind foal she claimed to have rescued months ago. It's remarkable what she's achieved with him, don't you think?" "Rescued?" Adam frowned, his mind flashing back to that day on his ranch when he had ordered a newborn foal to be abandoned, deeming it useless. The possibility that this was the same horse filled him with a mix of disbelief and shame, though he masked it well. Meanwhile, Lucia and her mother were busy packing up their equipment and getting Luce ready for the trip home, unaware of the thoughts stirring in Adam's mind. But before they could finish, a towering figure appeared before them. Adam Anderson, with his commanding presence, stood staring at them intently. "So, you're the owner of that horse," he said, breaking the silence. Lucia looked up, startled but not intimidated. "Yes, he's mine. Is something wrong?" Adam ignored the defiant tone in her voice and shifted his gaze to Luce. He examined every detail, the horse's frame, his elegant posture, even the way his ears twitched, attuned to every sound. There was something unmistakable about him. "This horse," Adam began, trying to sound casual, though his voice trembled slightly. "Where did you get him?" Lucia met his gaze cautiously, sensing the weight behind his question. Lucia hesitated, not wanting to reveal too much, especially to someone who clearly belonged to the elite world she had always tried to avoid. "I found him abandoned," she finally replied. "He was in terrible shape, but I decided to take care of him." "Abandoned? Where?" Adam pressed, his tone now laced with urgency and curiosity. Lucia paused for a moment but then remembered something her mother had always told her. Never lie, even if the truth was uncomfortable. "Near a road, not far from a large ranch." "I think it might have been yours," she said, looking Adam straight in the eye. The millionaire's face tensed. There was no doubt left in his mind. This was the same foal he had ordered to be abandoned, the one he had deemed a waste of resources. Yet now, standing before him, that so-called waste had become a magnificent animal that had captivated everyone at the competition. Adam quickly composed himself, masking his unease behind a veneer of feigned cordiality. "He's an exceptional horse," Adam commented, trying to sound casual. "I'm impressed by what you've achieved with him." Lucia didn't respond immediately, sensing there was more behind his words. "I'd like to make you an offer," Adam continued. "I'm willing to buy this horse from you for a generous sum, let's say $100,000. Lucia's eyes widened in shock. The amount was unimaginable, especially for someone with such limited resources. Her mother, who had been listening from a few steps away, stepped forward, equally stunned by the proposal. "That's a lot of money, Lucia," her mother murmured, but the girl didn't take her eyes off Adam. "He's not for sale," she said firmly, her voice filled with resolve, surprising even her mother. Adam raised an eyebrow. He wasn't used to hearing the word no, especially not from a child. "Listen, this isn't something you can easily turn down. With that money, you could help your family, improve your home, maybe even buy other horses. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity," he insisted, trying to sound reasonable. Lucia took a deep breath before answering. "Luce isn't an object or just a horse," she said, her voice steady. "He's my friend, and together we've overcome things you couldn't even imagine. No matter how much you offer, he's not for sale." Lucia's words rang out like a blow to Adam. Deep down, he knew she was right. Luce wasn't just a horse. He was a symbol of what could be achieved through love, dedication, and faith. Yet, Adam's pride wouldn't allow him to admit it. "Very well," he said finally, forcing a tense smile. "But if you ever change your mind, you know where to find me." As Adam walked away, Lucia turned to her mother, who looked visibly shaken by what had just happened. "Are you sure about what you did, sweetheart?" her mother asked. Lucia nodded with determination. "Luce is priceless, Mama. What we've been through together is worth more than all the money in the world." What Lucia didn't know was that this encounter would be just the beginning of a much larger conflict. One where she wouldn't just have to defend Luce, but also prove to the world once again that true champions aren't born from privilege but forged in the valleys of perseverance. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and comment. The goal is 5,000 subscribers. Let's continue the story. News of Luce's incredible performance at the competition quickly spread throughout the town. While many were still in shock, admiration for Lucia and her blind horse began to grow. However, not everyone shared the same sentiment. Adam Anderson hadn't forgotten Lucia's refusal to sell Luce, and in his mind, that rejection had turned into a personal challenge. It was no longer just about money, it was about pride. The millionaire decided he wouldn't let a humble girl stand in his way. Luce was a special horse, and Adam was convinced that his rightful place was in his stables, not in the hands of a girl who, in his eyes, couldn't possibly understand his full potential. Not in the hands of a girl who, in his judgment, didn't know how to fully realize the potential of an animal like Luce. Lucia, on the other hand, was so focused on her training with Luce that she remained unaware of the moves Adam was beginning to make. Her life continued peacefully, in the same field where they trained daily, but an ominous shadow was slowly creeping over her. One morning, as Lucia and Luz went through their training routine, a luxury SUV appeared on the path leading to their field. Lucia looked up and recognized it as Adam Anderson's vehicle. The car came to a stop, and before she could react, Adam stepped out, accompanied by his lawyer. "Lucia," Adam began, his tone cold and calculating. "Since you refused to accept my offer, I've decided to take a different approach," Adam said, his voice carrying a clear challenge. Lucia frowned, immediately recognizing the defiant tone. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, keeping her composure even as her heart began to race. Adam smirked arrogantly. "I want that horse, Lucia. And if you won't sell him willingly, I have the legal means to take him." Lucia couldn't believe what she was hearing. He was threatening to take Luz away from her. She wouldn't allow it. Yet, Adam kept talking, not giving her a chance to respond. "I can have that horse declared part of one of my collections. With the right training, Luz could become the champion I've been looking for to represent my ranch. I assure you, in my hands, his future would be guaranteed." In an act of courage, Lucia stepped closer to Luz, positioning herself beside him like a barrier between him and Adam. "Luz is not for sale, and I'm not going to let anyone take him just because they see him as another trophy in their collection," she said firmly, meeting Adam's gaze without wavering. Adam seemed to relish the attention, his smirk growing wider. His gaze was calculating, and for a moment, Adam remained silent, observing Lucia in the foal. There was something about her determination that he couldn't ignore. However, it wasn't enough to sway him. "Very well," he said at last. "It won't be easy for you, but don't worry, Lucia. This isn't over. I know how to handle situations like this. I'll show you." With those words, he turned and climbed back into his SUV. Lucia watched them drive away, her heart pounding. She knew that Adam's warning wasn't an empty threat. He had the resources and influence to try to take Luz from her, but Lucia was determined not to let that happen. That very afternoon, Lucia and her mother went to the office of a local lawyer, Dan Phillip, known for his sense of justice and dedication to helping those in need. They knew their chances were slim, but they refused to give up without a fight. Dan Phillip, an older man respected in the community, listened intently as Lucia recounted her story. "This man has no legal claim over the horse," Dan Phillip said after a long pause. "But don't underestimate what he's capable of. He has the money and connections to exert pressure. At best, he could try to force a sale." Lucia nodded, fearful but determined. "I don't want Luz to become just another commodity. I want him to stay with me, so we can keep training and showing what we're capable of achieving." Dan Phillip looked at her intently, recognizing the passion in her eyes. "Then we'll fight. We won't let him take what's yours. But you need to be prepared. It won't be easy." "I know," Lucia replied firmly. "I know, but I'm not giving up." With Dan Phillip's legal support, Lucia began preparing for what lay ahead. Fear crept in at times, but her confidence in herself and in Luz was far stronger. She knew this wasn't just about the foal's future, it was about proving to the world that even horses dismissed as worthless could shine through dedication and love. The confrontation with Adam Anderson was just beginning, and Lucia was determined to do everything in her power to protect what she had fought so hard to achieve. She didn't know how much more pressure she could endure, but each passing day made Anderson's threat feel more real. The millionaire's visit with his lawyer hadn't been just an attempt at intimidation, it was the start of a much more serious conflict. Soon, Lucia began receiving letters from Anderson's attorneys, demanding that she sell Luz. Each letter was filled with legal jargon, written to overwhelm a 12-year-old girl who lacked the resources to fight a corporate giant. But Lucia was determined not to give in. Each time a new letter arrived, she read it carefully and handed it to Dan Phillip, who helped her decipher the complex demands. With his guidance, Lucia began to familiarize herself with legal terms, realizing that while Adam Anderson had wealth and influence, he had no legitimate claim to Luz. However, laws, like many things in life, could be manipulated, and Anderson knew how to play that game. Dan Phillip explained that the only way to win the case was to prove that Lucia had legally taken possession of Luz when she found him abandoned. "The issue here is ownership," Dan Phillip clarified. "If Anderson can prove the horse belongs to him, he could reclaim Luz through a forced sale or settlement. But if we can demonstrate that he was abandoned and you rescued him, then by law, the horse is yours." Lucia nodded, her sense of determination renewed. She had rescued Luz, cared for him, and trained him. He had gone from being a weak, blind foal to becoming a champion, all under her care. How could anyone else claim him? Lucia thought, The question echoing in her mind as the days passed and the trial loomed closer. She grew more nervous with each passing moment. The pressure of defending Luce weighed heavily, not only on her but also on her family, who began to fear the financial strain of a costly legal battle. Despite the letters and threats, Lucia never stopped training Luce. Every day, from dawn until dusk, they practiced together, perfecting his jumps, his movements, and most importantly, their connection. Lucia wasn't just training Luce to excel in competitions, she was preparing him to stand strong for what lay ahead. One morning, as Lucia and Luce trained in the field, her mother approached with a worried expression. "Lucia, the trial is tomorrow. Are you ready?" her mother asked softly. Lucia paused for a moment, gently stroking Luce's neck, drawing strength from the calm her horse always gave her. "I'm not sure if I'm ready, Mama. This is all so hard. But I know what I feel, and I know what Luce means to me. I won't let them take him." "I know, sweetheart. I know," her mother replied, pulling her into a hug. "We're with you, no matter what happens." The day of the trial arrived, and Lucia felt as if she were stepping into a battlefield. The courtroom was tense, filled with lawyers, witnesses, and a crowd of spectators who, despite having no direct connection to the case, wanted to witness how a young girl and her horse would stand up to one of the most powerful men in the region. Adam Anderson sat confidently, his demeanor proud and self-assured. Beside him was a renowned attorney, known for winning even the most challenging cases, who scrutinized Lucia and her mother as if he had already passed judgment. The trial began with a formal argument from Anderson's lawyers, who claimed that Luce rightfully belonged to Adam because the horse had been born on his estate, and he had paid for its breeding. According to their version, the foal had been discarded due to its blindness, but it still remained part of Anderson's property. Lucia, with Dan Phillips' support, presented her defense, recounting how she had found Luce Abendan Ed, injured, and on the brink of death. She shared the story of how she had rescued him, cared for him through her own hard work, and trained him into the champion he had become. Luce wasn't just her legal property. He was her companion and her friend. Anderson's lawyers tried to discredit Lucia's testimony, suggesting she was just a child with an overactive imagination. But Lucia refused to let their words shake her. Each time they referred to Luce as a worthless animal, her resolve grew stronger. "He has a value that can't be measured in money," Lucia declared, her voice unwavering as she locked eyes with Adam, who watched her with a mix of disdain and surprise. "He's more than a horse. He's my friend, and I'm not going to lose him." After what felt like an eternity, the judge finally delivered the verdict. The courtroom fell into complete silence as the decision was announced. The ownership of the horse named Luce is hereby awarded to Lucia Gomez, who has clearly and convincingly demonstrated that she rescued the animal from a state of abandonment and cared for it as her own. There is insufficient evidence to support Adam Anderson's claim of ownership, and his argument for possession is unsubstantiated. The room erupted into murmurs. Adam Anderson, visibly furious, clenched his jaw in frustration. Lucia, her heart pounding, turned to look at her mother, who was crying tears of joy. Lucia's eyes welled up with tears as the reality of the victory sank in. She had Danny it. She had fought for Luce, and now he was truly hers. The judge's words echoed in her mind as her mother embraced her tightly, whispering words of pride and relief. The crowd began to murmur, some in disbelief, others in admiration. Adam Anderson stood up, his face flushed with anger, but he made no move to protest. His grip tightened on the papers in his hand, but he didn't dare speak. As Lucia and her mother walked out of the courtroom, Lucia's heart soared. It wasn't just a legal win, it was a triumph of love, hard work, and determination. She looked forward to the future with Luce, knowing that they had proven to the world that anything was possible when you fight for what you believe in. And with that victory, Lucia not only defended her right to Luce but also showed the world that with love and courage, even the greatest obstacles could be overcome. The day after the trial, Lucia woke up early, as usual, with the sun beginning to rise on the horizon. But this time, as she looked around, she couldn't help but feel that something had changed forever. The nightmare of losing Luce was behind her, and now the future lay open before her with new possibilities. That day, the town celebrated Lucia's victory. Local media arrived at her house for interviews, and neighbors came by to congratulate her. Everyone was amazed at how a young girl, with so little, had taken on someone as powerful as Adam Anderson and won. Yet, for Lucia, the applause and recognition didn't matter as much as the bond she had with Luce. It was a reminder of what they had accomplished together, a testament to their hard work and determination. As the days passed, Lucia and her mother received invitations to larger equestrian competitions, some even from other states. The talent of Luce, combined with Lucia's tireless effort, had caught the attention of the equestrian world. But for Lucia, each competition wasn't just about winning, it was about showing everyone the strength of the bond between her and Luz. They had proven that even the most unlikely champions could rise when given the chance. No one could believe that such a young girl, with so few resources, could face a man as powerful as Adam Anderson and win. But Lucia didn't get caught up in fame or recognition. For her, the most important thing remained her bond with Luz and the future she would build alongside him. As the days passed, Lucia and her mother began receiving invitations to larger equestrian competitions, even from other states. Luz's talent, combined with Lucia's tireless effort, had not gone unnoticed. The competitions became a routine for them, but also a place where they showed that sometimes, the horses that others discard have the power to surprise the world. Lucia and Luz's journey wasn't just about victories. It was about proving that greatness doesn't come from status, money, or pedigree, but from the heart, perseverance, and the willingness to believe in the impossible. A year later, at one of the most prestigious competitions in the country, Lucia and Luz faced off against the best riders and horses in the circuit. The anticipation in the air was palpable, but Lucia knew that whatever happened, she had already achieved the impossible. She had given a voice to those who had been silenced, hope to those whose futures had been stolen, and with Luz by her side, she felt there was no obstacle too great to overcome. When the judge announced the winners, the names Lucia Gomez and Luz echoed across the stadium. The crowd erupted in applause, and Lucia, her face beaming with pride, embraced her horse. Luz was not just a champion, he represented everything Lucia had accomplished through hard work, love, and unwavering dedication. Later that afternoon, as Lucia and Luz prepared to head home, a familiar figure appeared before them. Adam Anderson, in a last attempt to reclaim his pride, had come to the competition. But this time, he carried no threats or lawyers. He came alone, his demeanor that of someone who had been defeated but who had also learned an important lesson. "Lucia," he began, his tone far less arrogant than in their previous encounters. "I came to congratulate you. Your horse is a true champion," Adam said. "Not just for what you achieved on the track, but for what he represents." Lucia looked at him silently for a moment, evaluating his words. She knew it wasn't an apology, but it also wasn't an attempt to take Luz. It felt like a kind of acknowledgement, something Adam had never shown before. "Thank you," Lucia replied, her tone calm. "We achieved this together, Luz and I. No one handed us anything, but every day we worked to get here." "I know," Adam admitted, his gaze shifting to Luz with a mix of respect and admiration. "What you've done with him is remarkable. You didn't just give him a chance, you showed the world what perseverance really means." Lucia didn't respond immediately, but her look was resolute. "You didn't give it to him, Adam. I did. And that's the greatest gift either of us could ever receive." Adam nodded slowly, as though he finally understood something he had been ignoring all along. Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Lucia and Luz standing together on the track, bathed in the glow of the setting sun. The days that followed were peaceful. Lucia and her mother continued their training and competitions, always keeping their focus on what truly mattered, the well-being of Luz. Lucia's life, though filled with challenges, had taken a turn toward a bright future. She realized that true victory wasn't in the medals or trophies, but in the journey she had shared with Luz. She had learned that kindness, courage, and perseverance could overcome even the greatest obstacles. With each passing day, her bond with Luz grew stronger, showing that he wasn't just a champion in the world of competitions but also in life. In competitions, the name of Lucia and Luz began to echo in every corner of the country. But for Lucia, every applause was a reminder that she had achieved the impossible. She had transformed her life and that of her friend, the blind foal that no one wanted, into a story of hope, overcoming obstacles, and love. In the end, Lucia and Luz showed the world that, when given a chance, even the weakest can become the greatest champions. And so, with every jump, every race, every step, they built a future full of infinite possibilities, both for them and for everyone who believes that anything is possible when you fight with your heart. If you've made it to the end of the story, I'd love for you to leave a comment rating the story from 0 to 10. I'd also be thrilled to know where you're listening from and if you enjoy these heartwarming animal stories.